for making your time to be here. I know it's hard at conference period to drop your kids off and run in, but for you guys, at least it's the end of the day. So you'll just get your kids back and pack them up. Is that what y'all do, or y'all are already packed up?
We're already packed up.
Oh my goodness. So welcome to the end of your day is what I should say for you guys. So today we are going to tackle looking at our data a little bit, both progress monitoring data and Amplify data, and thinking about how can we use that data to make a difference in our classrooms, to help change our instruction a little bit, pinpoint where our kids need more help, and what we can do for them. A little about me. I recognize several of you guys from doing your beginning of year testing, but it's been a long time since that happened. So, and even then I was just coming to grab your kid. I wasn't coming to say like, hey, how are you? It's nice to meet you. I'm so-and-so. So again, my name is Amy Bettis. This is my husband, Cody. We were high school sweethearts. We have been married 21 years. We've been together about 25, which is a really long time. This is our daughter, Kate. She just turned 15 in January. Sorry, I was like, January. And our sweet dog, Coda, who is a year old. And then this is a picture of one of my kindergarten classes. I have been in education about 14 years. I have taught pre-K through about 10th grade, but most of my experience has been in the lower grades. I did a lot of private school and some enrichment programs. But this is only like my 6th year here in HEB. And while I've been in HEB, I taught kindergarten for a lot of years at River Trails. And then I was a 5th grade teacher at Shady Oaks. And currently I'm serving the district as a Reading Academy cohort leader. So helping our teachers move through that process that all of you guys will get to go through in the next, either next year or the following year based on the House Bill 3, the Texas mandate. This is why we do everything though, right? Sometimes when I start talking about data, I'm not one of those people who just love the data and the statistics and running the calculations. It does not warm my heart. It's these faces that are warm my heart. So when I'm thinking about data, I'm always thinking about my little people. I'm thinking about them and their success long term in this world and how that data is going to help me. If I look at it the right way and shift my instruction correctly, that's going to help these people, well then I'm all in on data. Does that make sense? So I know that sometimes when we start looking at some of this and talking about coding, it's super artificial and it starts to feel kind of clunky to me at times. But when I think about them and their joy as they grow as readers, writers, thinkers, speakers, listeners, all of the strands, that's what keeps me oriented. So today we got some lofty objectives in the short amount of time we have. We are going to try to maximize our ability to use our data to make a difference for our kids. So we're going to look at our progress monitoring forms to ensure how we're coding is correct. And that doesn't mean that I'm here to tell you what you're doing is wrong. There just might be some coding that you want to shift here or add this to your coding and things like that. We're going to learn how to use those data collected either from our progress monitoring assessments or from Reading 3D, which we just finished that huge cycle of the middle of year testing, to determine where are our students strong, where are they weak, and then at the end, if we have time, we're going to look for some simple ways that we can use what we found in the data, the weakness areas, to help our kids grow very strategically. So, starting off with accurate progress monitoring. Progress monitoring procedures, when we say accurate, there's a lot of right ways to do progress monitoring, but the best way for us to progress monitor in our district is going to be according to the same rules and procedures that Reading 3D uses. If we do it that way, our data is reliable. There's no surprises when we come to middle of year because we've been progress monitoring according to the same standards. And if we have reliable data, then the decisions we make and the way we change our instruction is going to make a really big impact for our kids because we're doing it based on that reliable data. And it's going to boost our students' comfortability with the testing process. Does that make sense? Because every time we progress monitor them, we're giving them the same prompts. We're offering them the same level of support or lack of support that the testers offer to them. They're getting familiar with the language of the test. All of those things we're doing are supporting them in being more comfortable. Dibble's progress monitoring is pretty straightforward, right? We just use the same iPad, it's the same rules, all of those things. So We certainly know that in our district, LaDonna talks a lot about we do not practice DIBEL skills. There's no drilling and killing of it in literacy stations and things like that, because we know that what's really going to move our kids is well-balanced literacy experiences. But when, like I said just a second ago, if we're progress monitoring them using the same rules of the test, they are becoming more exposed to the testing format. And if they're not clear on the fact that when I say, I'm going to show you some make-believe words and I want you to tell me what you see, if they sit there and are giving individual sounds with that, we would track that in progress monitoring, but right then when the test is over, I'm going to say, Laura, listen, you were looking and you did such a good job. You were saying, but Miss Bettis, when I say I want you to read these make-believe words, I want you to blend all of that together. Laura's going to have this light bulb moment. You know what I'm saying? So I'm helping her by explaining the process, and then she's going to be more prepared when she gets to the decoding portion to know exactly what to do. So where we get more hairy is not the DIBELS progress monitoring, it's our TRC progress monitoring. What counts as an error, what doesn't count as an error, how do we code it? So I asked you guys to bring some of your running records, and so why don't you grab one maybe for a kid that you're a little concerned about, and look over some of the errors that you regularly mark. Maybe you're marking, and again, please know that there's not like any judgment on how you're marking or not marking these. This is just a, I'm down to my last one. I'm gonna put it right here, but Katie Harrell is on good order to get you your own copy of that sometime. Sorry about that.
I'll get it after.
I don't think I ran enough for all the interventionists.
That's okay.
So what I just gave you is like the Fountas-Pinnell list of errors. Now, that's like, to me, a list of the errors that I should be coding. That doesn't mean that I have to use their same markings. Does that make sense? And maybe if you have a really strong mind, you went to LaDonna's progress monitoring training and those are the exact marks you use. But that's too much for my brain to hold. So, for instance, I don't code every correct word they say with a check mark above it. Some people do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, my kids were always so fast. And if they made a mistake, I was too busy trying to record the mistake that I would get really behind. And I never wanted to tell them, stop, like, stop, you can't, like, wait for me, and then catch up, and then let them keep going, right? So that's not something I did, but that didn't affect the total of decoding errors. Does that make sense? Or let's say when your kids repeat a phrase, I would always just draw a big line back to wherever they did it. I didn't like bracket it out and do what they did. But I knew when I looked at it, they were going back because they were fixing something up, right? They knew that they had made a mistake, it didn't sound right. They were going back, and so I was coding it. So is there anything, you don't have to answer this out loud, but when looking at the page I just gave you, are there any errors that you might look to yourself and think, ooh, I didn't realize I was supposed to be coding for that? Or maybe you're looking at it and you're like, yep, I do this one, I do this one, I do this one. How is that? Is there something, also, if you look at that column that's all the way over on the right side, it'll tell you if it counts as an error or not. So like the repeat, we code it because that's good information for us when we're trying to make valuable instructions. But if you look at the repeat, it doesn't count as an error when they do that. You see how it, so all of those are kind of like the rules of reading 3D. Those are the things that your testing cadre are using as they are moving through that. And so I'm gonna, that is yours to keep. Just reflect and think about it and make sure, like I said, that's gonna really affect your totals on if they're independent, instructional, or frustrational, depending on how you're coding and things of that nature. In comprehension, that's also, I would say that DIBELS progress monitoring is super black and white because you use the device. Then I would say decoding, running record, like just marking what they say, it's a little bit grayer because you might not have been coding all the errors or you might have counted something that wasn't, but then comprehension is like really gray, right? When we're trying to ask them questions and imagine what a Reading 3D assessor would take or would not take for their like correctness. The cadre members, you know, they have that booklet that tells them this is is the question, and these are the 3 acceptable responses. So it's really easy for them to say yes or no. But when we're using the baskets, or y'all are using the Founders of Pinnell Guided Reading stuff this year, it has the question, but sometimes it doesn't have the exact specifics on, well, what if they said this, or what if they said that? So on those, we just have to use our best judgment and try our best when we're asking them. You know, if it says turn to page 6 and tell me how Ms. Valente feels about Mrs. Littlejohn. So, and the kid just sits there. It's really hard not to say, turn to page 6, right? Like, it's hard because we're teachers and we're trying to help them be, but in the testing day, the cadre members cannot say that, right? So we would go ahead and mark it as wrong in the progress monitoring time, but then there's our teachable moment right after that to say, listen, when the question says on page 6, I need you to open it to page 6. Does that make sense? But you don't say that during the test, and then maybe you guide them to page 6 and you help them try to figure out and infer based on these things how they feel, but it's wrong. Like, does that make sense? Like, the questions aren't even counted wrong, but you're coaching them through it. How do you track your students' responses on the comprehension? And again, this is not like a gotcha. This is like, we're just talking here. When you ask them a question, like, how are you noting that on your running record of what they say or don't say?
I'm just underlining where, like, in the acceptable answers, I just underline or check mark, right, if they said that type of thing.
Like, yeah, like something around here. Perfect, yes. What else?
If they don't.
Okay, so just taking it.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I do a lot of underlining, and then I also write a lot of the things that they are saying.
Yes.
That way I can go back and look over it and, like, did they,
Yes.
because it's not always word for word what they say.
I kind of did a hybrid version of all of those things. You know what I mean? Like, certainly, it makes it a whole lot easier to just circle it in the acceptable answers instead of writing it out if they said that exact thing.
Right.
But anytime they added any other details, or even if they gave the wrong answer, I would like try to script out exactly what they said. In the moment, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't even, honestly, in the moment, I feel like a secretary. I'm just writing as fast as they can talk. But then I can go back to it, and that's where then I can study, like, why did she say, like, using this horrible example that I've created, why did she say she felt this way about her? And maybe she got it wrong. She understood how she felt, but she couldn't find the text evidence to support it. And you know, some of the questions sometimes, they can't just say, well, she liked her, and you have to tell from page 6, where did you find that information out? You know what I'm saying? So that helps me by scripting it more and by crossing things out and circling them. That's going to help me dig deep into that student's data later to find out how I can help guide them in instruction. Does that help? How do we ensure that the rigor of our questions is similar to TRC? So sometimes, and I don't know, does y'all's progress monitoring data align in 2nd grade to the Reading 3D data pretty well, or did you have some surprises?
We said for the kids, like, not the Spanish immersion kids, but like our kids that were here in person, it did align.
Okay.
Online was a different story, and then I think Spanish immersion was different too.
Okay, yeah, because you've got a lot of things going on this year, right?
Yeah.
And so, if you're pretty aligned, then that means that you can feel like, okay, I am holding them to the same level of rigor as the cadre members would be. And so, you know, you can certainly feel that. If sometimes when we have a surprise, we want to push them a little bit harder or ask a little bit more. Or one of the groups today, I said, because she was like, well, how do I know if it's a good enough answer? Your cadre, especially your veteran cadre, should have a pretty good idea. Like, you could go to them and say, okay, I had this book, and here was the question, and this is what the child said. Do you think that was rigorous enough that it would have been acceptable if it was? You know what I'm saying? And if you do that a time or two, you use the same books for progress monitoring over and over again, so you're going to kind of develop that sense for yourself. Does that make sense? Also, you've got, if you're looking for some more questions, if ever you look at those questions, especially 2nd grade, because you're getting up into those higher levels, you've got your, this is kind of your Cliff Notes continuums. Katie had given you guys this at the beginning of year. if you go to the curriculum, underneath the Rainbow YAG in the reading behaviors folder, this one, because I was a kinder teacher for so long, this is A through P. There's also one for P through Z. And so you guys may have some kids that are getting up into those higher levels. So you may not need this one that starts in A. You may need, or you might need both. Like you just came in and said, do you want version 1 or version 2? You kind of are on the fence in second grade, especially with COVID and not being in school so long. You may have kids that are very, very low, and you still have your kids that are very, very high, and y'all are trying to do all the things for all the people. Y'all are amazing. But this is a really good, the point in this, and every level is the same. You've got reading behaviors on this side with a grid. What I would do in reading, guided reading, is I would write Miss Littlejohn, Miss Valenta, I would write everybody's name across here that was in that group, and then these are the behaviors, and as I saw you did that today, I would check off that behavior and be able to kind of track, and for me to see where are your gaps, and what do I need to work on you in an independent reading conference, because maybe the rest of the group, everybody else has that one just fine, but you need a little more help with it. I'm going to work with you one-on-one on that so that you can continue progressing to the next level. But on the back are comprehension questions. And they've got fiction ones and informational text. You know, those questions are going to be very different. But they've got a good range of explicit questions and implicit questions. So if you're finding that they're really struggling with making inferences, you might ask them a few extra inferential type questions just to make sure that they're really ready to go in and progress to the next level. Probably there are not too many second graders that are still struggling with explicit questions, but if they are, you could certainly ask them a few just to make them feel good and moving through it. Okay. Same procedures as reading 3D, and those are the continuum questions. You brought your continuums? Maybe, yes. No, you're good. The continuums those questions are all in the continuums, and all those reading behaviors that are in that document. This is just the Cliff Notes version. When LaDonna made this for us, it's just, and I brought my little one, this is only pre-K through 2, but that sucker is like kindergarten through 8th grade. Yes. So that one is just so big, and it's beautiful and wonderful.
For all
but
your
this
kids
is kind
in
of
8th
a
grade.
condensed version that makes it easier to tackle. And Ms. Littlejohn, since you're looking in, if you'll go to kind of the back where it looks like this. Yeah, keep going, keep going. There you go. Are you there? Okay, keep going. Yeah, you're there. You're almost there. Maybe not. Sorry, it's hard. I'm gonna put my mask back on so I can get closer to you. I should have a copy of like the books. Mine's in the very back end. Looks like
Oh, the
this.
guided reading, you were right.
Oh. Yes, here go. So it's got, when you get there, and I'm gonna come to you guys. So it's got like an example.
I think we don't have it because we teach with Pearson.
I love you forever. I'm gonna go back over here. I'm sorry, Pearson people. Okay, so for this half of the room over here, but I'm gonna show you it. You might need to like the behavior.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Behaviors are
we're gonna have
behaviors.
reading behaviors.
So it's got an example of a text. This one is very basic compared to what you've got there. But it's got word work ideas, complexity of sentences they need to know, vocabulary work, what kind of genres you might see. This has got a lot of what that Cliff Notes version has, but you could use this to help you plan word work for right before guided reading. You could use this to help you make sure that your kids have, this one for level F says that they need to have a grasp of plurals, contractions, and possessives. So if my kids don't know contractions yet and they're trying to do F, I'm going to teach lessons on contractions to help move them forward. Does that make sense? So it's a really good place to reference when you're trying to build instruction for your kids. That big book is just kind of intimidating, right? Like when you look at it and it's got so much in it. So the Cliff Notes are a great place to start, but then if you need to look deeper at somebody, that's what I would definitely recommend. We've already talked about this, that after you finish progress monitoring, that's when you want to coach your kids, not in the middle of the progress monitoring because that skews your data, but as soon as you get finished, that's when you dig in and you say, hey, the question said turn to page 6. You didn't turn to page 6, you just took a guess. Next time I want you to do this. And so those are your teachable moments. All right. Oh my goodness, we're doing so well. All right, so studying student data. Over on the far side of your running record, so you've got where you make their coding tabulations. If you look all the way over on the right side, do you see the MSB column? Do y'all know about what would be your level of comfortability with MSB? Like, I've heard of MSB, I've never heard of MSB, I know all about MSB and I use it every day. What do you think? Fair. This is a safe space.
I've heard it, but I don't know how to.
Okay, so MSB is just a way to think about students' decoding errors that help you find patterns so that you can plan your instruction accordingly. So these are the three cueing systems, so meaning, structure, and visual. This chart, when I found this chart, I thought this is such a nice, easy way to think about MSB in a way that I think makes really good sense. So M for meaning, so they make errors, but they make sense. So a good example here is Sarah watched the kid play. That makes perfect sense. She substituted the word child for kid, but she's making meaning when she's reading. Does that make sense? A syntactical error would mean that it sounds right, so they use acceptable English. Sarah watched a child play. They're not going to trip up because it makes sense in the syntax of English. Does that, or Spanish, sorry. Whatever you're teaching, their error. And MSB, I think, holds true regardless of what language you're in. I'm going to go out on that limb there. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure. But they still test in English, correct?
They do, but we've been told that once they've met the grade level, we need to flip them over and start testing them in Spanish, progress monitoring.
Okay, so see, there's all kinds, you've got so
I've
much
already
going on
got
over
12 who are out, so I need to start
there. That
testing
is
them.
amazing. Aw,
13, 14, 15,
y'all are so
17.
lucky. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I could also see the syntax being maybe not as trouble for second as much as maybe first, but as they're trying to learn both languages, they might be confused and get hung up on some syntax and make some errors with this sometimes just because of the two languages that they've got going on in their brains. And then visual, does it look right? So if the child said, Sarah watched the child pay, they still are seeing the first sound, they're seeing that last vowel pair, and so it's making sense visually, but it's still an error. Does that make sense? Miss Zanelli said that she had a kid reading, I think just today, that she was progress monitoring, and it was a book about a forest, and the child said jungle. Again, they made meaning, right? So that would be a visual error, because jungle does not look the same as forest. So they're not attending to the visual cues, and she would want to really work with that kid, especially if one time, everybody makes an error here and there, right? But if you're seeing a pattern with this child over and over, you would want to, again, work one-on-one with them, or if you're seeing a pattern with a small group, work in a small group where you're really telling them to, hey, go back and look at that first, what's that first letter again? What sound does it make? And then a lot of times they're gonna self-correct. Like he would have said, oh goodness, oh, that doesn't make, you know what I mean? And he would have attended to the detail and fixed that up. So being able to think through this is important because good readers use all three of these systems in a well balance in order to comprehend and move through text with enough accuracy to comprehend. So I'm thinking that you probably don't calculate your MSB already, like formally on your sheet, or, okay. And as a teacher, I certainly did not either. Like that's a lot, right? When you're trying to make all the progress monitoring deadlines and all the things that we've got going, the only time I would do it was when I had a student that I was really concerned about, that I wasn't able to figure out what I needed to do differently to help them break through to the next level. So then I would take, kind of like the comprehension I was telling you, I would write down everything they said, circling and underlining and crossing things out, but I would go back and study it later. It's the same thing with the MSV. I would code it just like normal, all my errors. But then if I said, okay, I was really concerned about Kate and how she's reading, then you can go back and look at that running record and say, okay, this is a meaning issue. This is syntax, especially for you guys. Like, they're confusing their two languages in their brain, or these are visual errors with like forest and jungle. So I thought we would take a second and pull out your running record again, the one that you had pulled for the student you were most concerned about, and look at some of the errors that you see that you marked. And try to think, are these more meaning-based errors? And I'm gonna push it back to this slide to kind of help you with this. Are they making meaning errors where it still makes sense, but they're not reading the right word? Are they making visual errors where it doesn't even line up? What are they doing? Or if you've got one that you're stumped on, let me know and I'll come help you too. And sometimes not every error, sometimes errors fall in multiple categories, so don't think that there's always a right answer either, if that helps. Sometimes to me, meaning and syntax kind of play, like sometimes it doesn't make sense and it doesn't sound right. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just giving you information about, again, what is your child doing well and where might they need you to help them, come alongside them and help them out a little bit. I'm gonna cut you off. Y'all keep thinking though, like, it's one of those things that the more you do it, the quicker you'll get at it. And now that you know to look for it and how it can help you, please continue applying. We could do a MSV training for probably 3 hours one day after school. It's just so complex. So don't feel burdened if right now you're like, oh goodness, this feels really tricky for me. This is just kind of an overview. Katie's gonna send you a Google form if there's something that you want to know more about, something that you would like me to come talk to you about in a conference period, or send you some more resources on, or let you know where in the continuum you could look for it, things like that. Any of these things, you just reach out and you let Katie know, or you let me know on the Google form, and we'll get it for you. But one thing so before I leave it though, let's say you know your kid is having issues cueing in the visual system and that you've identified that as an error. Okay, great, now what do I do, right? Like, half the battle is figuring out from your data what is the problem. The other half is like, okay, now what? And so my prompting guide is from one of the old editions because I don't have a new edition. But your prompting guide looks like that. But y'all have, because y'all are second grade, and again, you reach so many levels, you've got a part 1 and a part 2. So the part 2 looks a little different than my part 1. But on part 1, you've got prompting for MSV. So you've got a whole thing here to where if they are saying, sorry, let me see, I'm gonna let you see it closer. So for like meaning, structure, and visuals on the back, like these are teaching points and prompts you might use and things you might reinforce with them. So it's just got the MSV, the B's on the back, and so it's got just some like, okay, these are teaching points, these are prompting of how, like, it's not helpful to them to just say, that doesn't make any sense. It's much more helpful to a student to say, whoa, does that make sense? And how can we fix that up? So you've got meaning, structure, and then the visual. But this also has all of these different prompts for all kinds of different issues you might be having with a kid that you're like, goodness, their rate is really off. What do I say? So it's just got, does that make sense? Version 2, goodness.
For like comprehension.
Okay, and so this is much more decoding, I guess, and that would be moving you into the header. But your version 1 should have that as well. Again, the prompting guide could be its whole own training, but just so you know it's there and how to use it and why you might want to open it sometimes, especially with that adoption, we got so much so fast. It's really hard to understand what half of it was, and we just got that last year, and then we left in March and we never came back, and then we've been living in COVID, so you really haven't even had time yet to explore all of your resources. So don't feel bad if you're like, oh gosh, the first time I found this spiral bound thing was today when I had to, like, totally not a big deal. Like, please don't feel
It was still shrink wrapped.
just kidding, like, y'all, we're all in it together. That's the beauty of new adoptions and new teaks is that we're all new here together. And so don't feel, no question is ignorant, no, wherever you are is where you are, and it's just about continuing to move forward from that point. So, we already did this. Reading 3D data. So, we just finished the other one, but I wanted to take a second and pull up, oh, wouldn't you know it. Close it. If you'll pull up yours, I'm gonna pull up mine and get it dialed up to you guys. You know how it takes a little bit of time there. Looking for a second. So the chart, you guys have probably already noticed that chart that's on the top with the, oh, there it is. The chart that's on the top that's got the different, this is like a snapshot of your entire class. And the cool thing is that Dibbles Next didn't have this, but Dibbles 8 does. This top part is a really great way of looking at your class as a whole, right? And trying to evaluate what are their basic strengths and where are they not as strong as you would like. A good way that I would look at it is if these two numbers add up to 40 or 50, that's a place where your class is generally weak. LaDonna says that anytime you give an assessment, if more than 30% of your kids don't have it, that warrants like an entire class reteach. Now we know that our curriculum is super tight, so we don't have time to like pull that out in whole class, but that's where you would pull it out in Stripe, you would pull it out in guided reading. Small groups would be a great way to reteach that. So if I was looking at this, man, look at how, oh, they're composite. And we know we want to go deeper than composite, right? 32% are at benchmark on decoding. ORF. Oh, you've got to really well spread in all the categories. But it helps you to kind of determine. So like this, you'd be hovering
Whose is
around
that?
39. It's interesting we have
Can't see.
0 yellow on that. So it kind of gives you a snapshot in a glance. Look at the maze. That's crazy. Maze being so new for them this year, they did really well. But I might, certainly these 32, but it helps us get bigger pictures. Does that make sense of how anytime it's going to be over 30 that you would want to look into it? But then it would be, especially for you since you don't have huge trends on either side, to look more in depth at your kids. So you've seen the percentiles, right, where you can turn on to see like where they're ranking at Bedford Heights is there. And then if I kind of come down, what I would basically, you don't probably have time to dig deep into every single one of your kids, but any kid that looks strange to you, like it doesn't add up, they have blue on their TRC, but they are red or yellow on Dibbles, or sometimes like looking deeper than their composite score is going to help you a lot too. So when I'm kind of trying to look at, trying to think, like what is this 13 for Landry? And if I click on it, you see how then it pulls up for me? I can see exactly what Landry did during that. And you can see the blue, right here he went and then after that, or he or she, sorry. She, sorry. The second I said that, I was like, oh no, that could be either way. But you can kind of see like what you might want to work on, what's going really well. Especially like so she was red here, but then all these yellow measures, and she got green on ORF. Kind of helps you to dig in and try to see. But see, like, look at this one who's green, Elvina. So she's benchmark on TRC, but she's red on Dibbles.
She speaks Russian at home.
That'll do it.
That's
So
what
I
it
guess sometimes that data, you have to know the rest of the story on that kid. right? But that's an anomaly that you would be that low on your dibbles, but be right where you're supposed to be as far as TRC goes.
Smart,
Oh,
considering.
She makes meaning, it sounds
awesome.
like really, really well to be able to answer all of those questions. So I encourage you to take a second and just kind of experiment through here. Also, have you seen all of these extra tabs up here, like this instruction tab? If you were wanting to get some other ideas of things you could do for Elvina to like boost her, like you said, she's so smart, but she speaks another language. What could I do to help her improve her Dibble scores? What was her last name?
No Chve.
So see right here, I went into the, I went into instruction, and then I went into students, and I found her, and it says, Elvina can produce primary consonant letter sounds, but does not blend the sounds into words, which we know she does, or she wouldn't have gotten to be a J, right? But she was having trouble in dibbles, being able to express that she can do that. So it's got patterns, and then down here below, look at all these activities. It's got 11 pages of activities where you might be able to work some of that into like before guided reading started, or maybe you get her going independently on something and you're running a guided reading group while you're kind of, you know what I'm saying, things to kind of build some of her fluency with her letters and sounds. But I think that's really great. And then, have you guys seen where you can click into your Amplify reading and see exactly what are they doing when they're logged in? Okay, so here, so in classes right here, so even from your just benchmark page, right here where it says Amplify reading, when I click on that, it shows me, sorry, I went to Trinity Lakes. This is not the droid that you are looking for. Fox, that's where I was. I think that your class would just automatically be there for you, but it'll show you everything just right there. So this is like your class summary, trouble spots, but then you can get more detailed reporting of them and like the skills they're working on. You can see, I think down here, it'll show you even down to like how much time are the kids spending. Let's see if we can, where's our friend Elvina? We've been talking about her. So like Elvina, we can see when she actually logged in. We can see what she's working on, like she's completed decoding one syllable words with letter combos. She's not started this, but you see how you can kind of see what she's working on in there? I don't know, I really like that because it helps me know when I think that, when I'm leading a guided reading group and they're out there supposed to be doing that, I don't know how you guys would like get up and walk around while you're doing, like, how do you monitor what they're doing on their screens? So this would let you know, especially if you've got some online kids, it would help you be able to say, yes ma'am.
Sorry, I'm waiting 5-year-old and she's help. Okay,
No.
I keep having a demo class, because I've been trying to do this for a while to see what they're doing. but I can't.
Okay, so scroll, go back up to, that's you. And where did it say demo? I'm sorry, I saw it, I think just a second.
Right here, but like whenever you said you were looking on there, I've heard that several times.
Can y'all see your class? Like your exact, okay. Is that
I
your
told her to
kids?
click on do that.
I did, and it did this again. It's doing that. Yeah.
That might be something worth calling the Amplify, there's an Amplify help desk number on that front page, and I would tell them exactly, sometimes they ask for your like login information, but they're legit. But they would definitely be able to help you with that. Amplify is kind of
Kids, it's
a,
time for us to go.
it's kind of a wormhole that you can just keep going and digging and moving further,
Have
but
it been on this week?
Does it
Yours shows all the kids.
I get.
Thank you.
I looked at this yesterday and I did see it, because I knew her on, oh, here, usage. Yeah, here.
It's weird that yours, maybe it's like a setting, like a.
Oh, it said quick demo and I pushed the button and it worked.
Hey, good, you solved it, okay, good. It's just-
She gets pulled now.
Yeah. That's how you can tell who gets pulled in and stuff and who doesn't. Because their minutes are all up. That's cool.
it is a wormhole. When you get into Amplify, you could just dig forever. Today, I wanted you guys, again, you could do an Amplify training that literally could last 3 hours, checking each measure and digging deep. But I wanted you to see that basically just go in there and click. Click on this, click on that. Like, as you click, you get to keep going deeper and deeper, which then helps you again to figure out what are your kids actually doing and how do we need to affect our instruction based on that. So, with all of that, thank you guys for coming. Thank you for all of your wonderful questions. I mean, seriously, y'all, we're in this together. If you have anything, Katie's gonna email you a Google form that's gonna ask you like, hey, was there something new that you learned today? Is there something you still have questions about or wanna know more on? Please fill that out, and please know that like, I'll definitely follow up with you if you're like, I need to know more about this, or what can we do about that, or can you come help us more with our Amplify? I will come and do whatever you guys need.